3 gang members surrounded a royal guard, taunting him with insults and spitting on his boots. One of them even dared to reach for his bayonet, certain the guard would stay frozen. But within a minute, all 3 were on the ground. Curious how it all unfolded? Make sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's dive into the full story. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Buckingham Palace, its golden rays dancing off the polished brass buttons and ceremonial bayonets of the Queen's Guard. Tourists clustered behind the ornate iron gates, cameras clicking incessantly as they captured what they believed to be living statues in red tunics and towering bearskin hats. The air hummed with the excited chatter of visitors from around the world, all drawn to witness this iconic symbol of British tradition and royal heritage. Among these guardsmen stood Corporal Daniel Hale, 28 years old, a veteran of 2 tours in Afghanistan with the Coldstream Guards. His military record spoke of commendations for valor, expert marksmanship, and hand-to-hand combat proficiency that placed him in the top 5% of the British Army. But to the casual observer, he appeared as motionless and decorative as the palace architecture itself. His steely grey eyes, hidden beneath the shadow of his bearskin, tracked every movement in his peripheral vision while maintaining the 1,000-yard stare that had become second nature during his 6 years of service. The protocol was clear and unwavering. Remain at attention. Do not engage with the public unless absolutely necessary, and above all, maintain the dignity and composure befitting a guardian of the crown. These weren't suggestions. They were commandments carved in stone through centuries of military tradition. Every guardsman understood that their role extended far beyond mere ceremony. They were the living embodiment of British military excellence, representatives of an unbroken chain of service stretching back through generations of conflict and triumph. The peaceful morning tableau shattered when a black sedan, its exhaust system deliberately modified to produce an aggressive roar, came careening around the corner of Constitution Hill. The vehicle's tinted windows and ostentatious chrome rims immediately marked it as out of place in this refined setting. Tourists instinctively stepped back as the car mounted the curb with reckless abandon, its occupants clearly indifferent to both traffic laws and common courtesy. From the driver's seat emerged Dex Morrison, a 24-year-old with an extensive criminal record spanning petty theft, assault, and drug possession. His designer tracksuit, adorned with gaudy gold chains and diamond-studded rings, served as a uniform of sorts, a declaration of his allegiance to the street culture that had shaped his worldview since adolescence. Tattoos crawled up his neck, spelling out gang affiliations and territorial claims in Gothic script that would be meaningless to most observers, but carried deadly significance in certain neighborhoods of South London. Rico Valdez followed, his swagger deliberately exaggerated for the benefit of the growing crowd. At 22, he had already accumulated 3 arrests and 2 convictions, his most recent stint in Pentonville prison having done nothing to curb his appetite for confrontation. The scar running from his left ear to his jaw served as a reminder of a knife fight that had gone poorly for his opponent, a fact he wore as a badge of honor rather than a warning of the violence that seemed to follow him like a shadow. The third member of their group, Trey Williams, was barely 19 but had already established himself as someone willing to go further than most in pursuit of street credibility. His youth masked a capacity for sudden, explosive violence that had earned him respect in circles where fear was the primary currency. Today, that volatility would prove to be his undoing. The trio's arrival sent ripples of unease through the crowd of tourists. Parents instinctively moved closer to their children, while seasoned travelers who had learned to read the signs of trouble began slowly backing toward the relative safety of the main thoroughfare. The guardsmen, however, remained as impassive as ever, their training preventing any visible reaction to the disruption unfolding before them. Dex surveyed the scene with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up potential prey. The tourists, with their expensive cameras and obvious unfamiliarity with the area, represented easy targets for robbery or intimidation. But it was the guardsmen who captured his attention, their stoic silence presenting what he perceived as an irresistible challenge to his authority on these streets. "Look at these clowns," he announced loudly, his voice carrying the particular brand of aggressive confidence that comes from a lifetime of using intimidation as a primary tool. "Standing there like toy soldiers. Bet they wouldn't know what to do if real trouble came knocking." Rico laughed, the sound harsh and grating in the refined atmosphere of the palace grounds. Man, they probably never seen a real fight in their lives, just playing dress-up for the tourists. His words were designed to provoke, to test the boundaries of the guardsman's legendary composure. Trey, eager to prove himself worthy of inclusion in this impromptu performance, decided to up the ante. Yo, they're probably too scared to even move. What kind of soldier just stands there while someone talks trash to their face? He took a step closer to Hale's position, his movements deliberately threatening. The crowd's murmur grew more anxious, several people beginning to fumble for their phones to call for help or perhaps to record what they sensed might become a dramatic confrontation. An elderly gentleman in a bowler hat approached one of the other tourists, suggesting in hushed tones that they might want to move to a safer distance. The tension was becoming palpable, like the electric charge in the air before a thunderstorm. Hale remained motionless, but behind his impassive exterior, years of military training were automatically assessing the situation. His peripheral vision catalogued the positions of all three antagonists, noting their body language, the way they carried themselves, the telltale signs of individuals accustomed to using physical intimidation to get their way. His breathing remained steady and controlled, but his muscles were already beginning the subtle preparations that would allow him to explode into action if circumstances demanded it. The confrontation escalated when Dex decided that words alone weren't providing the dramatic impact he was seeking. With theatrical flourish, he pulled out a cigarette and made a show of lighting it, blowing the first puff directly into Hale's face. The smoke created a grey cloud that temporarily obscured the guardsman's features, but when it cleared, his expression remained as unreadable as before. "See, I told you they were fake," Dex proclaimed to his companions, emboldened by what he interpreted as weakness. Real soldiers would have done something by now. He took another drag and repeated the gesture, this time holding the cigarette so close to Hale's face that the ember nearly touched the fabric of his tunic. Rico, not to be outdone, began circling the guardsman like a shark, sensing blood in the water. "Maybe we should check if he's even real," he suggested with mock concern. "Could be one of those wax figures from Madame Tussauds." With that, he reached out and jabbed Hale in the chest with his index finger, the gesture deliberately disrespectful and designed to provoke a reaction. The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. Some were clearly concerned for the guardsman's welfare, while others seemed to view the confrontation as free entertainment. Several people had their phones out, recording what they expected would be either a humiliating defeat for the soldier, or perhaps an arrest of the troublemakers by arriving police. Trey, feeling the pressure to contribute something meaningful to the group's performance, decided to push the boundaries even further. "You know what? I think we need to test how real this soldier boy really is." His hand moved toward the ceremonial rifle at Hale's side, fingers extending to grasp the weapon that represented not just military authority, but centuries of British martial tradition. The moment Trey's fingers made contact with the rifle, something fundamental shifted in the atmosphere. What had been a tense but manageable situation suddenly crossed into territory that demanded immediate and decisive action. Hale's training, honed through countless hours of drilling and refined in the crucible of actual combat, kicked in with machine-like precision. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying in its efficiency. One moment, Hale appeared to be nothing more than a ceremonial figure, a living statue bound by rigid protocol and military discipline. The next, he had become something else, entirely a weapon with human consciousness, guided by years of combat experience and unleashed by the clear and present threat to his person and his post. Trey never saw the strike coming. Hale's right hand, still gripping his rifle with his left, shot out like a striking cobra, the edge of his palm connecting with devastating precision to the young man's throat. The blow, delivered with surgical accuracy to the exact pressure point that would cause maximum disruption to his opponent's respiratory system, dropped Trey instantly to his knees, his hands clutching at his throat as he struggled to draw breath. Rico, standing to Hale's left, had perhaps half a second to register what had happened to his companion before the guardsman's boot connected with his solar plexus. The kick, delivered with the full weight of Hale's body behind it, lifted the smaller man clean off his feet and sent him sprawling across the cobblestones, his designer sneakers skittering uselessly as he tried to regain his footing while fighting off waves of nausea. Dex, the self-appointed leader of the group, found himself facing the full attention of a trained killer, who had suddenly been released from the constraints of ceremonial duty. Hale pivoted on his left foot, his rifle sweeping in a controlled arc that caught Dex across the side of his head with the wooden stock. The impact produced a sound like a cricket bat hitting a leather ball, and Dex's expensive gold chains scattered across the pavement as he collapsed in a heap, his consciousness flickering like a faulty light bulb. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 15 seconds from first contact to final resolution. The crowd stood in stunned silence, their phones still recording but their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The transformation of the seemingly passive guardsman into an instrument of swift and decisive violence had been so complete and so sudden that many observers weren't entirely sure they had actually seen it happen. As quickly as the violence had erupted, it was over. Hale smoothly returned to his position of attention, his rifle properly positioned, his bearing once again that of a ceremonial guardian rather than a combat soldier. The only evidence of the confrontation was the three figures groaning on the ground at his feet, and the slightly elevated rhythm of his breathing, which returned to normal within moments. Trey was still on his knees, one hand pressed to his throat, while the other supported his weight against the cobblestones. His earlier bravado had been completely replaced by a dawning understanding of just how close he had come to serious injury. The precise nature of Hale's strike had been calculated not to cause permanent damage, but the message had been delivered with unmistakable clarity. He had been completely outclassed by an opponent who had been holding back the entire time. Rico lay on his side, curled into a fetal position as he fought off the waves of pain radiating from his midsection. His designer tracksuit was now stained with dirt and his own saliva, the street credibility he had worked so hard to cultivate evaporating like morning mist in the face of his comprehensive defeat. The scar on his face, once a badge of honor, now seemed like nothing more than evidence of his capacity for poor decision-making. Dex was perhaps in the worst condition of the three, his head ringing from the impact of the rifle stock and his vision swimming as he tried to make sense of the gold chains he had worn as symbols of his success in the criminal underworld lay scattered around him like the remnants of his shattered reputation. Blood trickled from a small cut above his left eye, and he would later discover that the impact had loosened two of his front teeth. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of shock, admiration, and nervous laughter. Several tourists burst into spontaneous applause, their appreciation for the guardsman's skill overriding their concern about the violence they had just witnessed. Others seemed genuinely disturbed by the swift and efficient brutality of the encounter, perhaps having had their romantic notions about military ceremony shattered by this glimpse of the lethal reality that lay beneath the pageantry. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the morning air as Metropolitan Police units responded to multiple calls about a disturbance at Buckingham Palace. The first officers on the scene were members of the Diplomatic Protection Group, specially trained personnel responsible for security around high-profile government buildings and foreign embassies. Their response time was impressive, but the incident had been resolved long before their arrival. Inspector Margaret Thornton, a 20-year veteran of the Metropolitan Police with extensive experience in crowd control and public order situations, took charge of the scene with practiced efficiency. She quickly assessed the situation, noting the three injured men on the ground, the calm demeanor of the guardsmen, and the crowd of witnesses who seemed eager to share their versions of events. Right then, she announced in the authoritative tone that had served her well throughout her career, "I need everyone to step back and give us room to work." Her constables began establishing a perimeter around the immediate area, while paramedics checked on the condition of the three men who had initiated the confrontation. The medical assessment revealed that while all three had been effectively neutralized, none had suffered injuries that would require extensive hospital treatment. Trey's throat was bruised, but his airway was clear. Rico's ribs were tender but not broken, and Dex's head injury, while painful, showed no signs of serious concussion. The precision of Hale's response had been calibrated to end the threat without causing permanent harm, a level of control that spoke to both his training and his character. Inspector Thornton approached Hale with the respectful caution that police officers reserve for military personnel they recognize as professionals. "Corporal Hale," she said, having quickly obtained his identification from his commanding officer, "I'll need a statement about what occurred here this morning." Hale's response was delivered in the crisp, economical language of a professional soldier making an official report. 3 individuals approached my post and began making threatening gestures and statements. When one of them attempted to interfere with my weapon, I took appropriate action to neutralize the threat and maintain the security of my position. The investigation that followed would rely heavily on the testimony of the numerous witnesses who had observed the confrontation from beginning to end. Their accounts, while varying in detail and perspective, painted a remarkably consistent picture of the events that had led to the 3 men's comprehensive defeat. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, a retired schoolteacher from Yorkshire who had been visiting London with her husband, provided perhaps the most detailed account. Those young men were clearly looking for trouble from the moment they arrived. She told Inspector Thornton they were being deliberately provocative, blowing smoke in the soldier's face and making rude comments. When one of them tried to grab his rifle, well, the soldier simply did what soldiers are trained to do. A group of American tourists, led by retired Marine Corps Sergeant First Class Robert Martinez, offered a perspective informed by military experience. That guardsman showed remarkable restraint, Martinez explained. In my day, we would have put those punks down the moment they started getting aggressive. He gave them every opportunity to walk away, and when they crossed the line, his response was textbook swift, decisive, and proportional to the threat. Even some of the younger witnesses, initially sympathetic to what they perceived as an underdog confrontation with authority, found their perspectives shifting as they reviewed the video footage on their phones. Emma Thompson, a 9th university student, admitted, "At first I thought the guys were just having a bit of fun, you know. But watching it back, you can see how threatening they were being. The soldier didn't have a choice." The video evidence collected from multiple sources would later prove crucial in the formal review of the incident. The footage clearly showed the escalating nature of the confrontation, the deliberate attempts at intimidation by the 3 men, and the moment when Trey's grab for the rifle crossed the line from harassment into assault. Hale's response, captured from multiple angles, demonstrated the kind of controlled violence that separates professional soldiers from street fighters. As news of the incident spread through social media and traditional news channels, it quickly became more than just a local story about a confrontation at a tourist attraction. The encounter touched on deeper themes about respect for military service, the difference between ceremonial duty and combat readiness, and the consequences of mistaking restraint for weakness. Military historians were quick to point out that the Queen's Guard has always been composed of active duty soldiers from elite regiments, not ceremonial performers playing a role. Colonel James Blackwood, retired, a former commanding officer of the Coldstream Guards, explained to BBC News, "These men are combat veterans who have served with distinction in some of the world's most dangerous locations. The ceremonial duties they perform at royal residences represent just one aspect of their service to crown and country." The incident also highlighted the growing problem of antisocial behavior around major tourist attractions in London. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Chen, who oversees public order policing in the Westminster area, noted that confrontations with street performers, aggressive begging, and intimidation of tourists had been increasing over the past several years. This case demonstrates what can happen when individuals mistake ceremonial restraint for weakness, she observed. Social media reaction was swift and largely supportive of Hale's actions. The hashtag #RespectTheGuard began trending within hours of the first video uploads, with thousands of users sharing their own experiences of military service or expressing admiration for the professionalism displayed by the guardsmen. A smaller but vocal minority criticized what they saw as excessive force, though their arguments were undermined by the clear video evidence of the 3 men's aggressive behavior. The 3 men themselves, once they had recovered sufficiently to be questioned, offered various explanations for their behavior that ranged from claims of being misunderstood to assertions that they had simply been having a laugh. However, their criminal records and the clear evidence of their escalating aggression made these explanations difficult to accept at face value. The legal aftermath of the confrontation was swift and decisive. Dex, Rico, and Trey were charged with multiple offenses, including assault on a police officer, the Queen's Guard having police powers while on duty, disturbing the peace, and attempted theft of government property. Their bail was set at amounts that reflected both the seriousness of their actions and their history of failing to appear for court dates. The Crown Prosecution Service, after reviewing all available evidence, determined that Hale's actions were fully justified under both military law and civilian criminal law. His use of force was deemed proportionate to the threat posed, and his restraint in not causing more serious injury was noted as evidence of his professional training and personal character. Within the military hierarchy, the incident was viewed as a textbook example of how to handle civilian aggression while maintaining the dignity and standards expected of the Queen's Guard. Hale received a commendation from his commanding officer and was privately congratulated by senior officers who recognized the difficult position he had been placed in by the confrontation. The broader implications for security around royal residences were also considered. While the existing protocols had proven adequate in this instance, additional measures were implemented to prevent similar confrontations in the future. These included increased police patrols during peak tourist hours and better coordination between the various security agencies responsible for protecting royal properties. The three men who had initiated the confrontation found their brief moment of notoriety came with lasting consequences. Dex lost his job at a local garage when his employer saw the video footage. Rico was expelled from a community college program he had been attending, and Trey found himself unwelcome in several of the neighborhoods where he had previously enjoyed a reputation for toughness. In the weeks that followed, the incident at Buckingham Palace became something of a cultural touchstone, referenced in discussions about respect for military service, the consequences of antisocial behavior, and the difference between perceived weakness and disciplined restraint. The video footage continued to circulate widely, often accompanied by commentary about the importance of understanding that ceremonial duties do not diminish the combat readiness of professional soldiers. For Corporal Daniel Hale himself, life quickly returned to the routine of ceremonial duties and military service. He declined all requests for media interviews, preferring to let his actions speak for themselves. His fellow guardsmen, however, noted a subtle change in how tourists and other members of the public interacted with them in the days following the incident, a newfound respect that seemed to acknowledge the reality behind the ceremony. The three men who had challenged him eventually pled guilty to reduced charges and received sentences that included community service and mandatory anger management counseling. Whether they truly learned from their experience remained to be seen, but the viral nature of their defeat ensured that their names would forever be associated with one of the most comprehensive demonstrations of why it's unwise to mistake ceremony for weakness. The incident served as a reminder that in an age of increasing informality and declining respect for traditional institutions, some lines should not be crossed. The Queen's Guard, with their distinctive red tunics and towering bearskin hats, represent more than mere tourist attractions. They are symbols of a military tradition that has defended the realm for centuries, and that tradition is embodied by men and women who have earned the right to wear those uniforms through service, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to duty. As the morning sun continued its arc across the London sky, casting new shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace, the tourists returned to their cameras and guidebooks. The police completed their reports, and the guardsmen resumed their eternal vigil. But for those who had witnessed the events of that morning, the sight of those motionless figures would forever carry a different meaning, reminder that beneath the ceremony lies the substance, and that respect, once lost, can be very difficult to regain.